Unless you're someone who completely stays off social media, you'll have heard that a handful of us from the community were invited to visit Massive Entertainment in Sweden. Up until recently, there really wasn't a huge amount we were able to talk about, other than the fact that we were over there to talk about the Division 2 and have a tour of the studio. However, now that the official Battle for Brooklyn showcase has been released, I can now say that we were able to try out part of the DLC and provide feedback, as well as talking about the future of the game beyond the DLC. Unfortunately, I really can't talk about anything other than DLC today, but there is definitely some cool stuff that has been planned, and we can hopefully talk about soon. I won't bore you with the trip details just yet, but I'm definitely going to talk more about this a little later in the video, for those of you who are interested. Firstly, let's start with the story. We're going back to where the game first started, Brooklyn. Civilians who were able to escape Manhattan made it here and have been able to live in relative peace. Working together under Theo Parnell's leadership, they've managed to establish a thriving settlement. Unfortunately, this is all about to change, as the cleaners have decided to cross the bridge and have launched an attack on Brooklyn with their new weapon called the Purple Flame, something we've seen previously in the Meritus State incursion. The Rikers are also in Brooklyn, but have been there for a while, and up until now have stayed out of the settlement's way. However, the introduction of the cleaners, everything has been tipped out of balance, with the hostile factions fighting for every inch of territory. Through this story, we'll be seeing some familiar faces like Dr. Jessica Candle and Theo Parnell, but we'll also finally have a face to put to Melanie Hoskins. One thing I was a little disappointed about is that the story will be standalone from the main narrative, but I understand why it was done this way. For the DLC to be more accessible to new and returning players, they don't want people to feel like they need to catch up on 7 years worth of story in order to enjoy it. I should probably talk to their new linear mission structure. I was a little skeptical about this at first, but it actually works much better. Currently you can run missions in any order, with the difficulty being the only barrier. With this DLC you are forced to play the missions in order, but it still feels quite natural, and you're still running through the open world, so it's easy to get distracted, but it means that the story is much easier to follow now. So what will we be getting with the DLC? 3 main missions. You can see this off to the side down here. The reason for this was to provide more flexibility when it came to the design of the missions. 4 world missions. These are basically side missions, except are replayable. 4 control points. These are a little more interesting than the ones we currently have, and will change depending on the difficulty level and the faction that has control. For example, one of the cleaner control points had fixed flame turrets that had to be disabled. There will be 12 open world activities, 10 bounty locations, 8 hunter riddles, story collectibles, a new open world map that I would probably say is about a third of the size of Warlords of New York. And last but certainly not least, more space in your stash. Not bad at all for $15 in my opinion. It's cheaper than going out for lunch. Firstly, it's important to point out that we weren't playing on our own character, or build, or even key binding settings, so it was a little difficult to gain a true gauge on the difficulty. We were using pre-built characters with purple and gold gear pieces thrown together. Also, the footage shown on screen is not my own. This is just B-roll footage we were all provided. We were given about 2 hours to play the DLC, and had access to the settlement, 1 open world district, 2 of the world missions, and 1 of the main missions. I'm not going to spoil the story for you in this video, but the nostalgia hit from seeing some of the old faces was nice. I actually kept the difficulty quite low, not just because of the super average builds we were given, but so I could also experience as much as possible. I breezed through the missions fairly quickly because I really wanted to get a feel for the open world, as this is something we would typically spend more time in the long term. I know everyone wants the snow back, but the look and feel of this map is so much different to the other 2 open worlds. The colour, the vibe, it's really well done. I spent a lot of time appreciating the trees and vines growing up the building walls, and the way the leaves interacted with the weather. This is the detail I love to see. And the way they show the autumn environment, moving more towards the cleaner invasion, and the scorched earth feel is really cool. The open world isn't huge, but one thing I noticed, and also everyone else seemed to comment on, is that it felt very dense with activities and events. There wasn't just a huge amount of running between things. Will this be a new place to farm outside of DC? I couldn't say, there really wasn't enough time to tell, and we only had access to a portion of the map, but it certainly felt more packed than Warlords of New York. Regarding the new skill, I'm one of those weirdos who actually plays the cover shooter game as a cover shooter, so the smart cover should be ideal for me. But again, with the subpar build, I don't think I was able to test it properly. I think it'll definitely mix some things up with the group play meta though. I typically only play with all red builds, so I only played the precision variant. Of course, the damage and handling boost was nice, but one of the other perks it gives is auto-reloading when you swap weapons. I'd somehow ended up with a couple of LMGs, so this gave a nice balance to the damage output. Empty a weapon, switch, rinse and repeat. I was trying to collect gear that was rolled into skill tiers, so I could see what it was capable of, but I didn't have much luck there. I would have liked to have seen it had a larger radius, but this could be something achievable with a better build. I generally go into these events attempting to break the game, because what better time to let them know than before release. However, it felt really crisp. I didn't find anything major. I had problems with a couple of pieces of cover that I couldn't shoot over, and I think I ended up inside of a boss at one point, but I didn't witness anything game-breaking at all. 2 hours flew by so quickly, and there were a lot of things I still wasn't able to experience, even with the small piece of the game we were able to try out. So my overall thoughts? I think they played it incredibly safe with this edition, but it was still very enjoyable. And when I say safe, I mean that there wasn't any new mechanics or game modes, etc. It's just more of what we're used to, which is fine. I still think we're getting a hell of a lot for the price tag, and the new look and feel of this area is quite nice. Plus, some of the devs did excitedly mention the final mission a couple of times, so I could stand corrected yet. Now, in regards to the trip, this isn't the first time I've been invited over to Massive, but the previous times were for the upcoming release of The Division 2 and then the release of Warlords of New York. These were huge events, with dozens of creators, media, and Ubisoft representatives from around the world being invited along. But these were very much just media or hype events. Obviously, I'm not complaining about being invited to those, but this one was much different. Firstly, there were only 12 of us invited, and it wasn't just the largest follower accounts that were targeted. In fact, a couple of the people aren't content creators at all. Sitting back and thinking about it, we all covered quite different areas of the community, while still overlapping in a number of areas. This small group allowed for a more personal, intimate setting where everyone could discuss and meet those who developed the game, without feeling like there just wasn't enough time in the day to get things done. Don't get me wrong, the days flew by, and most of the feedback I had to give was best documented late at night in my hotel room. However, on a different note, the crew that was sent over was a great mix of people. At least from my side, I feel like everyone got along amazingly, and we're out until quite late most nights to try and take advantage of the experience, with members of the studio often joining us. I'm not going to delve into the individuals, as there are a lot of people who don't want to be spotlighted, both with the crew that was invited over and the devs that hung out with us. But I would like to point out that 4 of the devs from the Bucharest studio were also flown out for this event. Given how heavily involved their studio is with the continued development and support of The Division 2, I was super happy to see this, and they are genuinely nice guys who are proud of what they've produced with this DLC, and they should be. I actually really hope to see them again soon, maybe even visit their studio if I'm lucky enough. It was really nice to hang out with them for the small amount of time we had. Plus, I'm glad I wasn't the only one who needed a fork at dinner, because chopsticks are hard. Like I said earlier, there was a good mix of people. A bunch of guys from around the US, Sergeant Greybeard, Rogue Gold, Solid FPS, Nothing But Skills, Splinter Shield, a couple from the UK, DJ Tickle and GC Rock, a few from Europe, Woods, Cheshire Cat, and another I won't name because I'm not sure he'd like that, and then there was me from all the way down in little New Zealand. Including the train ride from Denmark, it took me a little over 28 hours to get from Auckland, New Zealand to Malmo, Sweden. I felt like a zombie for the first day and a half in the country, but it was amazing to finally meet some of the people I've been speaking to online over the years. For the record, Rogue Gold's iconic voice is exactly the same in real life. Sergeant Greybeard, or Sergeant No-Beard I guess we should probably call him now, he was with me trying to see how high Rogue could take his voice, and he just couldn't. He just has a crazy deep voice, and he clearly has a brain the size of a planet. Anyway, on the first day I tried to stay awake until night, so I could reset my body clock. But we ended up going out for dinner, and then another dinner, and then another. The food there was amazing. Plus, Skills had a friend meet us there, someone from his clan who absolutely dined us at one place. More food than we could possibly finish, but it was bloody amazing. However, at 2 AM the next morning, my body wasn't playing ball and decided I should be awake. So at 3 or 4 AM I went for a walk around the streets of Malmo. It was so quiet, the police even pulled me over to check I was okay. Although they were probably just wondering what was wrong with me since I was walking down the streets in shorts and a t-shirt on a brisk 5-degree morning. Later in the morning, we all walked down to the studio, which was only a few minutes away from the hotel. Now obviously I can't go into too much detail here, but we met with some of the devs in the foyer, had breakfast, Yannick gave an introduction, we had lunch, and then jumped straight into testing out part of the DLC. Following this we had a workshop, interviews with the devs, and then we all went out to dinner. The next day was similar, but instead we were workshopping about Year 7 plans. And this is about where I need to cut off. While I can't talk about it, there is certainly some very cool ideas I'm looking forward to talking about more over the coming months. Following this, more food, more drinks, but most of the crew were prepping to fly out later on the next day. I was very fortunate in the fact that I was able to stay for another day, so I could rest a bit before jumping onto another long-ass flight home. If you're watching this video, it's likely that you're aware of my channel and that I'm predominantly the nerd of all things regarding the story. And through this, over the years I've gotten into contact with Lauren Stone, the narrative director. We've been talking for a number of years at this point, both through messaging and video calls. So it was so awesome to be able to catch up with her in person, and in fact she invited me over to her home. In respect for their privacy, I'll only gloss over this, But with the initial intention of only being there for a couple of hours and hope that I didn't overstay my welcome, I ended up being there for a whole day late into the night. It was the most chill ending to a super busy week. They cooked me several meals, I got my ass handed to me by a 7-year-old son playing video games on the PS5, and I got to explore a farm. I was worried this visit would be weird and a little uncomfortable, but it wasn't. It just felt like I was back home. I think I almost fell asleep on a couch at one point while Lauren was crocheting away. I'm no extrovert. Group events like this drain me, but this last day was the perfect wind down for the week before travelling back to New Zealand. I was going to talk about Year 7 in this video too, but I won't for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like this is already long-winded enough. But two, I'm not completely sure what I'm allowed to talk about, so I'll need to get that sorted and provide an update when I can. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening in. The trip was a blast, and it was amazing to once again be given the opportunity to hang out with some fellow nerds that I've been talking to for years. I'll catch you guys soon in the next one. Extremis Malus, Extrema Remedia.